but I'm going to introduce the Amazing Rando and let him kind of take it from there, and then we'll get started.
Right, great. How come you people aren't interested in the cosplay contest? That's where I want to be right now. Never mind, doesn't matter. And so my name's Rando Schmoke. The reason he said Amazing Rando is there's, I don't know if any of you know MST3K. I use the moniker. So in their movie, Mystery Science Theater 3000, in the credits at the end, they talk about the Amazing Rando throughout the credits, and they're referring to me, which was always a nice little kick when you get something like that in a motion picture. But no big deal. That's neither here nor there. I've worked for 25 years in designing, art directing television commercials and motion pictures and a little bit of theater and some television. And so I got the opportunity 2 years ago to come up to Salt Lake City from Santa Monica and help put together a program, design programs in what we call loosely the entertainment arts, and it's in game art and my field, production design, which we call entertainment design, and in sequential imaging, which is really comic art and sequential art and graphic novels, etc. We also are expanding that with digital video this next, after the first of the year, and audio production, which is engineering and audio production, and audio, it's not called production.
Music business.
Yeah, but it's music business, there's another one for audio recording for digital media. And that's all the sound effects kinds of side of the world. So in any case, the reason we opened this school up was because we came from varied backgrounds, and came into the entertainment industry and realized you don't need the way to get into the entertainment industry was to know something about the visual arts and then to expand that so that you could actually work in the areas that they needed people to work in. The first time I worked on a television commercial, they said they needed a small set built for an office. And I came out of architecture. You know, that's how I was trained in architecture. And I went, I can do that. I can design a simple little thing like that. We'll just build it fake out of some wood and throw it together, and it was great. And then I was off and running. After the directors realized there was somebody in their midst that could do that kind of thing, then that's what they kept coming back to me for. And then all of that just starts to multiply. The more skills you learn, the more somebody asks you to apply that to their particular project. And if you're in the entertainment industry, by and large, there is so much different varied work in the visual communication skills that all you need to know is a few of them, and you've found your way in. So we'll be opening up for questions, but I'll let Dan say something
yesterday
more.
we did this, and we spent so much time blabbing about ourselves and our careers, and that we really didn't get as much time as I wanted to find out about you people and what you want to do. I would assume that you're here because you're interested in manga and anime, probably costume design, probably hair, makeup, special effects, prosthetic effects, props, all of that sort of stuff that we deal with in the industry. So I'm just going to, instead of talking about myself and all that we've done, I'm just going to ask how many of you here are interested in a career in that world? Okay, so and that's good. So ask us, how do you get there? And what are you looking for? And what do you want to do? And we can answer your questions. I'm sure that some of you want to be comic artists or manga artists, and you probably feel there's no way to get into that. Maybe some of you want to be costume designers, and you feel, well, how do I get into that? How do I do that? I'm not sure where you're all headed, but wherever that is, I think we have a direction and an answer for that. So who has a question? Yes, ma'am.
How would you get into animation?
Animation, you mean like moving image animation?
Yes.
Can you draw? Okay. That, I mean, it starts with that. If you can draw, if you can tell a story with pictures, then you can do it. And if you want a career in that, you'd better be able to draw or learn how to draw and do it well. Have a portfolio that can convince somebody who's going to hire you that you're capable of doing that. And then you just learn the basic skills of animation. Now, whether that's cell animation or digital animation or claymation or however you want to do it, those are skills that can all be taught. Once you have those skills, once you have the portfolio, then you make the connections, or we help you make the connections to get into the field. And it's all going to depend on that portfolio. How good are you? What can you show them? What can you do? And the competition is intense. There's a lot of good people out there. And they'll tell you that the way they got into the business is because they knew how to draw, and it all started with that. And they were doing it because they loved it, and they spent hours doing it, and they pointed themselves in that direction. Do you do a lot of that work now?
I draw a lot.
Okay.
I've drawn characters and I've drawn my friends in animation. And
Do you develop the stories yourself?
Yeah, I've actually got a few stories I'm trying to write.
Okay. And so the problem is you don't know where to take it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, you can do it on your own, and you'll probably struggle with that for 20, 30 years trying to find a direction. Or you go to a school that trains you in the skills and the applications. And there are some schools like ours and others that have mentoring methods of teaching. They have internships. They have alumni that are working in the industry. And those are the connections you need to have in order to get hooked up, in order to have a career. But it's all going to come back to that one thing. Can you produce? Can you spend 8 to 16 hours a day drawing and producing stories and images that somebody's going to want? Now, you can do it for yourself, and that's a hard place to be, because it's a hard, you're going to have to probably have another job to support yourself for quite a while until you develop a reputation. But most animators end up working in a studio, either as a cell artist, an inker, a penciler, a colorist, and then from there you learn on the job. But in school, if you take a 4-year Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in animation or anime or comic arts, well, you're going to develop those skills there, and then you graduate with a portfolio, hopefully. And then with that portfolio, you have the ammunition to go out there. You're armed with that to sell to the employer. Regardless, it's a lot of work.
And I think the key in developing the portfolio is that you're not restricted to one style. I think a big thing that attracts people to anime is the style of anime. It's so different from what I would call the American style of animation, and so that's the first thing that attracts a student to it, or a young person to it. But that needs to expand. Your style needs to expand broadly, just because animation will ask you to do many, many different things, from like a WALL-E kind of thing to a Toy Story to Pokemon to whatever, right? That will just be a never-ending expansion. And so you want to have the hand that can change and can do, I can draw this way, and you know what, and I can draw that way. And, and maybe you're a lefty. Are you a left-handed?
I'm right-handed.
That's okay.
My brother's left-handed.
You'll get over it. I'm not left-handed, but it turns out a number of our students are left-handed that are in comic art for some reason. It's no big deal. But I think that's one of the places to expand. I know that BYU has a highly acclaimed animation department in their school, but they only bring in 25 students a year. So we don't quite have that competition at our school. It'd be nice if you could get into a school that has, where you've cross that hurdle first, but it means you've already shown up with a portfolio that's rather exceptional. And once again, portfolio will open up all kinds of doors, whether it's at schools or at businesses. Okay. Does that answer your question, you think?
Yeah.
Sort of?
Anybody else?
What you people back here are sort of have something. Go
Well,
ahead.
animation portfolio, is that like a reel of like an animation you've done yourself, or is that pictures you've just drawn? Like, is it an actual like folder? Or what is that?
All of it.
All of that.
Yeah.
All of that. Yeah, sure.
Would it
Absolutely.
be like a CD with your animation reel, or?
Could be that. You know, at our school, your portfolio will consist of an open portfolio, a book that they can look at all of your concept drawings from early sketches to blue line to pen and ink to color in real hands-on drawing. Then they're going to want to see any sort of digital reel you have, maybe a website. All of that kind of goes to support it. But what's important to most people who hire, and when I've hired people, I want to see what they're capable of doing. I want to see that they can take a pencil in their hand and conceive an idea. You know, if I say, well, here's a script, and it's got a character that, you know, it's from this economic standing, and it's a male, and he's 25 years old, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Conceive that person for me. Give me a characterization of that person. Let me see it. Well, I don't expect them to go back to the computer and noodle it out in, you know, one digital image. I expect to see 200 thumbnail sketches leading up to that. I want to see that process. I want to see what's going on in their brain and how they develop that character. And I think that's what an employer is looking for. They want to see what you're really capable of. You know, what's at the heart of this person. Yeah, we want to see the finished product, but the process is so much more important. It's like, how do you get from the thought? You have something in your brain. You have an idea. How did you develop it? How many sketches did you take it to get there? You know, right now I have a creature drawing class I'm doing. And the students, just to get warmed up, they have to do 100 silhouettes of bugs. You know, so they've got a bug book, and it's got 500 images of bugs. So they're going through the pages one after another, and they're drawing little thumbnail silhouettes of these. Well, what's the point of that, you ask? Well, they're doing bugs, they're doing birds, they're doing reptiles, they're doing everything. But eventually, they're going to develop creatures that are humanoid, that are cyborg, that are mecha, that are whatever. And it comes from that looking, that observation, and then putting pen, pencil to paper, and sketching it out. So there's another thing that we like to see too. How observant are you as an artist? Because really, drawing is nothing more than looking. You know, and so that's what we want to see. Too often, somebody will come in with a portfolio, and I've seen this in industrial design, and they'll have a couple of beautiful finished images in the computer of an automobile or a toaster or something they've designed, and they're fantastic. And you say to them, well, how did you get to that point? Well, I don't know, I just had an idea. Well, good, let's see the process. If they can't do that, they're not going to get hired. People who get hired are the ones that can lay it out on the table and say, there, I started there with nothing. I had an idea. I had these parameters that I had to design by. Boom, there's the process. So yeah, we want to see all of it. But not, you don't want to bring in 2,000 pieces.
Right.
You know, you limit it.
Do you want to bring in like a portfolio of your best things, and then have the rest available to ask them?
Well, yeah, you don't want to show them the worst stuff.
Right, of
You know.
course.
But what does that mean? The best things. How do we determine if it's the best stuff? If you have award-winning, let's say you have an award-winning screenplay you've written, well, we'd want to see that. If you have an award-winning exhibition piece of some sort, you'd want to see that. Yeah, that's nice. But we also want to see what you consider to be the best of your own work. You know, we typically don't want to see copies and renderings of somebody else's style, you know. But unfortunately, too often especially those who grew up with manga and anime, you grew up copying a style.
Right.
You know, I grew up copying a style too, but it was like Mr. Magoo and Daffy Duck, you know, but that changes because you mature and it's like, I don't want to be doing Daffy Duck for the rest of my life, you know, so you go through different phases to develop your own personality in your artwork.
So, in concert with her question with choosing the best things, so if you do pick what you want to present in your portfolio, and you say that we should provide like rough drafts and sketches, how much of that sketch and like build up into the final piece should be included in our portfolio? Because I'd assume it'd be quite a large bulk of the portfolio, but when is it too much?
Well, you know, maybe Rando can add to this because he's hired a number of people in entertainment to work in the art department. And, you know, in the art department, you're basically doing the architecture design for settings, for environments and interiors and exteriors. And we probably want to look at their concept sketches.
Sure. The main thing is, it's all about communication, right? So what you're trying to communicate the fact that you have a handle on a process, right? So I need to see enough drawings that show the beginning or the concept, the development area, and the finish. Maybe that's just 3 drawings, but maybe that's 6 drawings. So you kind of have to play that a little bit. And I know that personally with portfolios, my own portfolio, it was always bigger, and then it was like pulling stuff out, pulling stuff out, and pulling stuff out, and pulling stuff out, and until it was down to a manageable sort of size. The best advice I ever received was early on in my career, where an agent said, make sure that your portfolio is an example of your design ability. And then it's just like I understood what he meant. And so then it became, there's a drawing here and a drawing here, and somehow in the portfolio it's communicated. I used to have a little bouncing ball on my drawings and stuff that would go like, oh, so this is a concept. Here's some concepts. Oh, and here's development drawings. I see what this guy does. Okay, and now here's some finished stuff. And oh, and then here is it in context of the finished product, kind of thing. So it depends how you put it forward, but you're trying to communicate to me. And remember this, especially, you may not be across the desk from the person who's looking at your portfolio. You get that opportunity occasionally, but lots of times there'll be a secretary that comes out and says, Mr. Schmoke would love to see your portfolio. Can you leave it and pick it up tomorrow? And we'll be in touch with you. And so you go like, God, I wanted to tell him that page 2 relates to page 3 this way. Man, I got to know it in the portfolio. So that's the other side of it. You know, it's a communication device of your ability to communicate as well as your ability to draw with excellence.
Can I ask what kind of portfolio you're thinking of putting together?
Well, I am kind of in the midst of building my portfolio. I'm an illustrator, I guess you could say. I'm trying to build up a color portfolio. I don't really have a portfolio building it. And I'm not really looking to, well, I'm looking more to get into the video game industry, I guess, as like concept artist or something
And
like that.
as an illustrator or as a concept artist, right? You don't want to get in there as a code cranker.
No.
No, okay. So you want to be the art director, the guy with the ideas that conceives the characters and the concept of the story, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, again, that's the same sort of thing a comic artist would put together. You want to see character development. You want to see storyline development. You want to see half a dozen characters in a particular story and how they interact and some action scenes. And what they're going to be looking for is not only just the character developed, but also the environment that that character lives and breathes in. You know, so you have to be pretty good at environmental drawing and rendering as well as characterization. That's a lot of anatomy study. That's a lot of research of props and things in the world around us that we live in. A couple years ago, I was on a portfolio committee for high school students that were trying to get into the Center for Creative Design in Detroit, which is where they train automobile designers. And there was one kid I was looking at, he had a wonderful portfolio because he had one sports car design, but he took us through the portfolio with a concept sketch on basically a napkin, an idea he had. But then there was 4 or 5 pages of research, and the research were all animals, because he had this idea that this sports car had to relate to the speed and the grace and the beauty of a cheetah. So he researched cheetahs. He had animals. He had the color of the fur and all of this stuff in there. And all these notes. He had a few pages of notes that he'd written down to himself. Should it be rear engine? Should it be front engine? How does this animal react? And he was trying to develop actually a sports car, 4-wheel drive, cross-country sort of thing. After that, he had a number of silhouette sketches, maybe 100 little silhouette sketches of this thing that developed and developed and developed and developed. Then he took it to a full sketch. Then he did a half a dozen of those, some interior sketches, etc., some engineering sketches. He must have had 25 of those, and then some final drawings. He chose 3. Out of those 3, he worked one up in the computer as a color rendering. He took that to the model stage, a clay model. He had photographs of that clay model up to the final 1/6 scale model in full color, and that was in his portfolio. Well, yeah, he got into the school. You know, it was like that's what they were looking for. It's like, here's a guy who had an idea, took it through all of this process, took it to completion, you know, and that was his dream in life. All he wants to do is design automobiles. He was so pleased with himself, and rightfully so, because he was awarded a scholarship. Well, I guarantee he'll get a job when he gets through with 4 years of that. But I think that's the sort of thing you want to show in any of these things. If you're going to be a comic artist, start with a story. Start with your research. Don't be afraid to put down pages of notes and ideas, because in storytelling, in game design, in comic book telling, in entertainment design, in any of these, it always comes down to this research. There's people in the industry that's all they do is research. You know, they're sent to the National Archives. I have been. You know, and spent a week there on a terrible film years ago called Ironclads. And I was just doing research on U.S. Navy sailors from 1863. But the research is such a big part of it, you know, and to get involved with that, to find yourself looking at things that haven't been looked at in 150 years and to start applying that to the art that you're doing. And that just fleshes out the whole story, you know. And I think that's what a lot of us miss as artists. We go in with an idea, with a concept, we're going to tell this story, and you forget those little details, you know, when you develop it. But this whole portfolio thing is like, you know, you could come in with 12 of your best things and show us nothing else, and somebody might say, great, we'll hire you. And then they hire you and they find out you can't do research and you can't do the work, the concept work before that, and they'll get bored with you, they'll keep you on staff, but you might end up just doing busy work, who knows. You know, but if they have somebody who they can see can do that whole range, then they can plug you in a lot of different positions. You know, because you're not going to start out at the top, right? You know, they might look at your portfolio and say, wow, the guy's got great color sense, let's make him a colorist. So you're doing that for a year or two. And while you're doing that, you're learning by watching and helping somebody else do something else. You know, and you don't know where your skills are going to take you. So you want to, when you're starting out, show as many skills as you possibly can. If you have sculpting skills, you know, if you've been developing characters in 3 dimension, show that too. You know, somebody might look at your figures and say, wow, what are you doing drawing? You should be sculpting. You know, you should be making maquettes. You should be making figures. If you have, if you've been making your own costumes for these things and you spend a lot of time on that, and you think, well, I really like to draw, but somebody's looking at photographs of the costumes you've done. They said, we're going to put you in the costume department. You know, you might end up working in there. And what does that mean? Well, you know, costume designers are illustrators as well. They don't just start sewing something. You know, they do the same thing. They do an awful lot of research, and then they're doing these drawings of people, characters in costume. And then that's passed on to pattern makers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, who actually construct the costume. So there's that door opens for you as well.
Yeah, right alongside that, there was once was an African American college student, and he was a very good artist. And someone said, "Hey, wait a minute, your detail on these plants is exquisite. Why don't you change your degree to botany?"
Mm-hmm.
That man was George Washington Carver.
Yeah, the guy who invented peanut butter and a number of other things.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
And
not
so,
too
you know,
early.
you never know where it's going to take you, where you'll end up. You know, I've seen students who started out doing cartoons and then they're working as medical illustrators years later because they've spent so much time studying anatomy. But it all starts with that portfolio. What are you capable of doing? And at a young age, you often don't know. You just do things. But somebody will recognize it that doesn't know you and say, wow, gosh, this guy can do this and do that. You might be a weapons designer for, you know, feature films. Who knows?
I thought you were going to say General Electric.
Well, General Electric too.
Yeah.
That could happen. But
The other thing that I would mention, in a portfolio is it's great to have all of it laid out as a process, but there needs to be a reason for the person who opens up the portfolio to turn the page. And so maybe the beginning of the portfolio is 3 or 4 wow pieces, like, you know, that's good, turn the page, oh, that's good, turn the page again, oh, that's good, now we turn the page, now I want to know, I'll keep turning pages in the book, because now you've grounded it someplace else, and you're going to take me through some other more mundane information, but I'm already hooked now. So, you know, there's got to be a reason in your portfolio you want to try to put in there, a reason to turn the page. And so in the beginning, it's kind of like, you know, if it's a song and dance deal, you come out and you give them, Mammy, you give them the big one, right? And then you can go into singing Do, Re, Mi after that, to let them know that you can actually get some notes. Okay? There you go.
other questions? Yes, sir.
What type of 3D modeler programs does Broadview use or suggest, especially on the economic side of the scale?
3D modeling in the sense of digital or analog, or?
Just digital.
We start out with a year of core arts classes. Everybody has to take 3 classes. You have to take a basic drawing, a perspective drawing, life drawing, and then life drawing labs that are just continue and continue and continue. And then you have a 3D modeling class. You have 3 quarters of that. And then there are courses in 3D digital modeling. You know, but what we want in that beginning, we want to know that our students can draw and they can sculpt. You know, because what you're learning really is the fine arts. And then you apply those fine arts later to a career and to a skill. We could train you as a fine artist. You could be a sculptor and a painter and just do whatever you want. Well, we want our students to take those skills and then apply them to something else. In the game program, what do they have? They've got, I don't know, there's a half a dozen courses that are some kind of digital 3D model. So there's different, different tracks that start after you finish your core sequence. But everybody kind of goes through that together. It's like basic training. It's basic training for artists. It's no different than if you were a musician and you were going to become a pianist. You have to keep practicing your scales and the rudiments. It's the same in drawing and sculpting. You just keep doing that over and over and over again. I've known artists, friends of mine, who've been sculptors and painters and drawing for 30 years, and they always are in the studio back to that basic figure drawing class. It's every day, they're doing an hour of figure drawing and sketching and gestural drawing. It's just to keep their brain and their hand and their eye all kind of tuned up. Once you're capable of that and have the confidence of that, then we set you loose on advanced tools, if you want to call it that. And those advanced tools are in pretty much in that digital range. But is it any different than being able to draw and sketch and sculpt in real time? Not really, it's just a different tool. It's just a different way of getting it done.
Well, to clarify, I'm talking about like what type of software program, so.
Software, what do they have?
previously used
Maya and-
Maya is going to be a big one for figure modeling, and SketchUp is used throughout, and partly SketchUp because if you people are not familiar with it, it's called Google SketchUp, but it's free. It's a free download. It's intuitively friendly, three-dimensional modeling piece of software. It's also great for environments. It's the best for environment. It'd be difficult to model the human figure in SketchUp. It's meant for the three-dimensional environment world. It's used a lot by architects. It's used by set designers, both in theater and film. But otherwise, Maya is the other big one.
Maya, rhinoceros, what else are they? I can't remember. It's
Yeah,
got some new
rhinoceros was
thing
the
that's
other one.
coming in, I can't remember the name of it. We're so old school that, hardly even look at those digital tools. We leave that to the brainiacs that are younger and more developed in that. I know in the comics program, it's really old school, and we love it that way. It's you draw, you blue line, you pen and ink. From that point, we scan it into the computer, and most of the coloring is done digitally, and we don't need advanced programs for that, because it's pretty much two-dimensional work. But we want our students to be able to do it in freehand. And once they've, excelled at that, then it's like, fine, okay, here's your Wacom tablet, go ahead and draw it that way if you want. And some students are great at that, and others still like to go the old route with it. But it's kind of just like, what tools do you prefer? We know that in the game design program, it's heavy on the digital stuff. But even so, you still got to get to the foundations.
Did that sort of answer it for you?
Pretty much.
Okay.
A bit alongside that, because I noticed, fortunately, cell animations have become a dying art. Because now usually it's you draw it, you scan it, then you cover it, alter it. So, do you ever deal with that aspect, or?
Well, there's people who still want to do that. That's like, 100 years ago, and they said, oh, well, film is going to kill the stage. It never did.
No.
And none of these things really go away. I have a friend who teaches in North Carolina, and he does claymation. It's all stop action, but he loves building those little figures and moving them and taking a shot and moving. That kind of animation is still strong, and cell animation is still being done. And there's still a lot of old school people who like the process. Will it go away 100%? No.
No, it won't.
No. I think I think it will survive in one way or another. The digital world seems to be taking over a lot of stuff, but we see it kind of go in waves. In the early '90s, when in filmmaking, when the digital world kind of took over and all of the special effects were being done digitally, then all of a sudden the audience becomes so sophisticated that they can see right through it. Now it's gone back to, well, be better if we really did blow that building up.
Yeah, like Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, so now it's kind of a combination back to miniature building and real-time photography and matting in the backgrounds digitally, and so it's more composing. The skills and techniques come together, and I think that's kind of how technology runs anyway. You get a new tool, everybody's fascinated with it, they all use it, they love it, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, it's limited, and everything has its limits. So yeah, I think there's still going to be a career for those guys who do that, but not so much, But it's one of those things that you just love. It's like people today who just love painting portraits and like they're living in the 16th century, and they love grinding their own pigments and all of that stuff. And God bless them, let them do it. I think that's wonderful. That's a great skill and an art to have. So I think we're just always going to have. It's just always going to be that. The hammer just isn't going to go away, even though they have You don't have digital hammers, but they got those compressed ones and all of that.
Digital hammers.
Yeah, digital hammer. You know, but you still got to drive a nail. You're going to use a hammer one way or another. Other questions?
I just want to make sure I have the right idea. So with the portfolio, you pretty much put everything you draw in it: character designs, sketches, and the research you've done. Just pretty much everything you've drawn, from
Well,
pictures to base
do
builds.
you have one particular piece you're working on?
I am currently working on character designs because I've come up with stories that I want to write.
Okay.
So I am working on character designs, and I always do start with like the simple circle head, rectangular bodies, and put detail into do it from that. So in a portfolio, would you put like how you started from the very first circle and stick figure drawings?
I don't think
to
you have to go back to
the
being
details
5
you
years
put in.
old. But you know, I think it's,
Well, not that.
what are you trying to sell, first of all? You want to sell yourself as a comic artist, right? Okay, and a storyteller. So what, you know, you may want to have a script in there, something you wrote, okay? So you might, you know, the person reviewing that would want to look at an outline. And then we'd want to see your characters from that script, a description maybe even written down, names, that sort of thing, and then some roughed out sketches, you know, in completion. Your blue line sketches, your pen and inks, and then your color drawings in a completed book if you have it. You know, we'd like to see all of the panels stage by stage by stage, and then the published book. In our school, if you get that degree in comic art, that's what you'll have in your portfolio. You'll have 2 published pieces for sure, because you're going to self-publish them. That's a requirement for graduation. So you'll have your 2 published manga or graphic novels or comics, plus the work that led up to that. You know, so in your portfolio, they're going to see all of that, and they can say, oh, well, this person's capable, right? They just weren't the colorist, they just weren't the inker, they were all of those things, and they took it from concept, idea of story, all the way through to the end to publishing. Whether it sells or not, we don't care. What you're selling is yourself and the work that you've done. From that point, somebody who's looking for somebody who can do that will say, wow, you know, this kid's done all of this, plus published 2 pieces on their own. Okay, great. Then what they'll be judging you on is the quality of your work.
And I think the key also, once again, is that what are you trying to sell, or what door are you trying to open with this portfolio? So if it's your ability as a complete animator, then you'd want to cover the different stages. So some of the process, some of the concept, and definitely some finished full on that pages of panels that show the storytelling ability, you know. So if you have a story, that's great. If it's short, because they're probably not, person's not going to read it, but if they're compelled, if they're captivated by your work, they might want to read it. But usually it's like if you get a few minutes of somebody's time, that's going to have to be what you sell yourself through. So if you're trying to sell yourself as it's full-on animated, you need to show the different aspects. But definitely the finished stuff, that, like Dane was saying, full-on panels. If there's a completed book of any sort, whether it's 6 pages or 60 pages, you'd want to include that at least as an example of, look, it's complete, it's totally finished.
And typically, you know, if you have the completed book, then you only have to back it up with half a dozen of your best pages. And typically they want to see the action pages, you know, the ones that show a lot of action and dramatic, cinematic format. You know, that's something we teach as well, because all comic book stories are told in a cinematic language. You know, they were told in a cinematic language before there was cinema, and they just didn't know it. So once you learn that, and then, you know, that's the sort of thing that they're looking for. It's like, oh, here are the most dramatic pages from my book. We don't want to look at the boring stuff that kind of leads in from Act 1 to Act 2 to Act 3. We want to see that exciting stuff, then we want to see the completed. So you don't have to show everyone, you know, all 60 pages or whatever it might be. You know, just the best out of that piece. And you might have 2 or 3 pieces in there you want to do. Now, the other thing that comes along, as you're starting out and you're taking these classes and you're learning various skills, you're going to find out you might be better at something that you never knew you were. What happens in these comic classes is, because they have to take 2 screenwriting courses, some of these students find out they can write screenplays and never knew they could. So then it's like, geez, should I submit my screenplays? Yeah, submit your screenplays. You might end up doing that, as well as being able to do this other thing. Well, then that makes you a storyboard artist, as well as a screenwriter and a comic artist and all of the other things that come along with it. So you don't want to be trained as a one-trick pony. You want to have these options. And again, I've seen that with students who can do a variety of things, and then they're called upon to do something else. Much like, well, God, we really love your character, and look at the makeup on that. Have you ever done any real prosthetic makeup? And you say, yeah, I've done a little bit of that. I know how to work with the latex, and I can do that. Great, we're going to shove you in that shop for a while, and you're going to work on that stuff. Next thing you know, you might find you really love it, and that becomes a career. So who knows, Right now, I assume you want to be an animator.
Yeah.
Right, okay, and you want to make anime. Okay, well, let's point yourself in that direction. Let's see where it goes. And then call us in 10 years and let us know how that worked out.
Come back and join our
curious.
faculty.
How would you like some of your work to be like to be a live-action movie?
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
And there you go. That's where screenwriting comes in.
And we know that for a fact, especially in Japan, that most of their live action films now and TV dramas are all based on manga and anime. And it's become a huge business now for all TV dramas to be taken straight from manga and anime, with superstar heroes in them, action heroes from Japanese cinema. And that's become a huge wave there. So who's writing their films? Well, manga artists are. And it's not much different now in the United States. Hollywood has picked up on that. And why wouldn't they? A producer loves looking at a comic book and seeing the movie and saying, well, there it is. We don't need all these other people. Budget this and shoot it. Get it done. They could throw the book at Rando here and say, here, you're the production designer. Follow each frame. No cheating. Yeah.
I just asked for more money right away. But, it's like, this is going to be difficult. This page will cost money. They'll go like, no, shut up. No. But what he's talking about is kind of true. So.
So we've got 5 minutes, so who's got another question?
Geez, you only. Well, it's just like time that we start to wind down so that it's, I have an alarm that will go off momentarily. That's okay.
But you know where we're at. We're at the booth out here, the Broadview
See?
booth. If you want to come by and talk to us personally and get more information, that's fine. You certainly don't have to go to school there. We could care less if you sign up or not. We'd love to have you, and we'd love to train you and set you out into the world. But if you just want to come by and get some more advice and show us what you have, we can point you in a direction. We don't want to sell you a bill of goods that's not going to do you any good.
Who in this room has a sense that they know where they're going with it, or feels comfortable with the fact that they think they know where they're going with their education and doorway into the profession? Anybody? You kind of do. And you kind of do? And you haven't said anything.
I had a really quick question. If I wanted to get into costuming, would I make the portfolio out of? Just take pictures of what I have done?
Yeah.
Stuff?
Drawings you've done, sketches you've done to lead up to those.
Yeah, those would be really important.
If you're a pattern maker and a sewer, samples of that as well.
Would she want, because she does a lot of characters, like she's done all of ours. Would she want original like costumes that she's done, or would these be okay? 'Cause these are all
Those are fine too. If you want to just start your career as a costume designer on your own, it's going to be difficult because the competition out there is intense in the sense that there's a lot of schools teaching that, and they're going to get the first dibs on something. And what they'll teach you in a costume design program is characterization, drawing, sketching the human figure, draping the fabric, sewing, pattern making, cutting, all of that stuff, fabrics, surface design, how certain fabrics drape and how they fall, and what should be used and how they should be used. Because on the stage, fabric looks a lot different than it does on camera. On camera, you can't cheat. If something is supposed to be velvet, it better be velvet. You know, I mean, if that was the period that was used in, and the stage you can get away with it, the camera you can. There's all of that stuff you learn. And then you put together a portfolio for that. You know, in your portfolio, let's say you have, you're working on Oklahoma. You know, that's the stage thing that you've done. Well, they're going to want to see all the research you did, and how you developed your characters, and what the clothing looked like, and all of those drawings that led up to it, plus samples, fabrics, swatches, aging, distressing, et cetera, down the line. We're thinking of and hoping that within the year that we add a costume design program to our school. We know there's a call for it, and we know it falls in lockstep with everything else that we're doing. That and hair and makeup for stage and theater and film, and also visual special effects. So those things all kind of go together. And if you're looking at that now and you really desperately want to get into a good school for that, do some research and look around. But you'll have to spend those 4 years typically in a theater program, you know, and you'll be doing designs for shows. And then that'll get you a job, and if you want to be just an anime, manga, character, costume designer, maker, whatever, start your own business. Because there's really no place that teaches that. There might be in the future, and there might be even classes that would be added at certain schools, and I see that trend coming. Certainly if we open that program, there would be a couple of classes that were just in that particular genre.
And so you would photograph your designs on pencils. I mean, you would do it that way. I mean, as opposed to on a hang.
And that becomes real fashion photography stuff, because you want it to look as professional as possible. The other thing, a lot of costume designers end up in the fashion business. You know, costume designers become fashion designers as well, because let's face it, fashion is costume. You know, it's just how conservative you want to be.
So that answer a little bit better for you? Yeah. Anybody else with a question they're going like, I didn't get to ask my question. This is your chance.
Does the sequential editing degree, is there a lot of focus on both the writing aspect and the drawing aspect? So would get
Heavier in the drawing, but the writing is a serious aspect to it. It's going to take up a third of that program. There's also in all of these programs, there's a huge number of electives. You get 9 classes and electives that cross over in the other programs. So if you wanted to focus more on the writing end, then you would do that.
And does Broadview University offer a lot of?
Pardon me?
Does Broadview University offer a lot of writing classes or?
Online classes?
Writing.
Writing classes?
Yeah.
We have some creative writing classes, and we have the screenwriting classes. We have a scripting class for comics and that sort of thing. When the demand's there, we'll offer them. You know, and that, I mean, we don't offer a degree in screenwriting now. But you certainly, with the 2 classes that we offer in screenwriting, you're going to come away with at least one feature film that you've written in perfect format. I mean, that's part of the requirement. And we're getting the hook, so we got to go on and get out of here. And thanks for coming.
That's
If you have any other questions, just come by the booth.
Yep. Thanks very much for showing up today.